Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. Well, as citizens, we all have varying degrees of understanding or awareness of the LAPD, but there are 5 citizens who are tasked with the responsibility to know everything that's going on within the department and help guide it. I'm delighted today to be joined by Police Commissioner Dale Bonner. So nice to have you here.
It's nice to be here. Thank you.
All right, I had no idea that the LAPD, Police Commissioners, has been established for over 100 years. I mean, 5 individuals, citizens. How did that whole process come into being and the entity come into being, and what was it supposed to do and what is it currently doing?
Yeah, well, it didn't start in its current form. It was actually formed 153 years ago.
Oh, okay.
1870, and it was actually on December 31st of 1870 when the mayor signed the ordinance creating the police commission, which originally was comprised of the committee from the city council. And when you look in the historical annals, one of the interesting things you see is that the purpose that was stated for the creation of the commission was a concern about potential hilarious activities that might unfold on New Year's Eve. So it was getting ready for activities that would be either on or coincident with the coming of the new year. And then it was some years later when it was transformed to an all-citizen body. So it's now 5 citizens of Los Angeles who volunteered time to act as essentially the board of directors for the police department. It's also the opportunity to air amongst ourselves and with the public discussions about new policies and procedures that may be coming about and formulating. One of the most important things that we do is occasionally, unfortunately, there are serious use of force, which could be an officer-involved shooting or a head strike or something of that nature where there's a serious injury to someone in the public. And in those cases, one of our most solemn obligations really is to review all of the investigative materials and to sit almost as a jury, if you will, and make a determination as to whether the conduct of the officers involved was within the policy established by the commission or outside the policy. And in addition to that, there is a fair amount of civic engagement, community meetings and events and opportunities really to hear directly from the community. Recently, you saw there was a strong presence at the Martin Luther King parade, and that was a great opportunity to hear people just come out of their houses and come to the street and yell things to the chief of police and to a commissioner and others. So you use those opportunities really to hear what's on the mind of the public as well. And when you add all that up, sometimes it can be 20, 25 hours a week of work that is required, but it's certainly well worth the effort.
Well, in the last 5 years, there's been an enormous amount of things that have happened within the city, you know, from a pandemic to demonstrations to the call for reform. Would you say that the heartache and drama surrounding the George Floyd incident was really an impetus for a lot of reform within the LAPD?
I look at it this way. Much of what we saw and heard even during and after the George Floyd situation was really started some years earlier. You had the Trayvon Martin killing in 2012 and Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri in 2015. And I look at those incidents and a series of others as kind of the gasoline that was trickling out around the country, and then the George Floyd killing was really the match that started that's ignited this uprising that we saw in 2020, and then of course that was at the front end of a global pandemic that also I think had some influence. And much like the pandemic, I think the George Floyd killing and the 2020 protest had that same effect of accelerating a number of policy reforms and work on issues that had been underway for some time, but really took on a new level of urgency in 2020. In the 2020 protest in particular, officers not only heard a lot of noise that was directed at them, but they also were pelted with rocks and bottles and things of that nature. I make that point because it is they're trained very effectively to deal with protests and unrest and protect the right to protest and the First Amendment. But it's a much different equation when the police themselves are the subject of the protest, and on top of incidents that we saw in 2020, which didn't occur in Los Angeles. So many officers have the view that may have said that, hey, talk to us about things that we may have done or that may have occurred here, but don't punish us for things that happen in Missouri or in Florida or Texas or Georgia or elsewhere. Sometimes there's a disconnect because what you or I might see or hear in the media and as part of the national narrative and the local narrative, two things can be true at the same time, that there can be that very deep and wide set of issues that need to be addressed. And at the same time, when you go into some of these rooms and you talk to police officers who have just come from a local gathering or from the store, and they are engaged with the community, and their individual experience may be different from what they're reading in the newspaper. So that's why sometimes you get the reaction of, "What are you talking about? Why are we?" So you have sometimes you have that situation.
Who are we attracting into the LAPD? And are there issues now finding those people within this Southern California area, despite the fact that we're actually in a better place than some of the other places you've referenced?
I would say that that this is one of the key issues, the issue of staffing, recruiting and retaining the officers that you need and want into the profession. Now, some would fast forward and say, well, it's because you have the bureaucrats, the police commission, and others that are doing all these things that are driving people out of the profession. But it's much more complicated than that. That one, you take the global situation that you're almost in a full employment economy. So there's fierce competition for workers across the board. Added to that, in a place like Los Angeles and Los Angeles County with 88 cities, and many of them have their own police departments. So there's fierce competition even within the law enforcement community. Third, you have a lot of the morale issues, I think, and as I've talked to officers, one of the greatest sources of recruiting is other police officers and their families and friends. You see a lot of people who have fathers, mothers, fathers,
absolutely.
uncles, aunts, others who have been in the profession. And as those officers retire and are less excited, enthused, and interested, it could be about anything. It could be morale. It could be like the NFL, where people are looking at the long-term impacts of being in that profession, who don't want their NFL players, don't want their kids playing football. You add all those things together, the pay is not always what it should be. The stress of going in and doing more with less. Lastly, to your point about the quality of officers, that's the other risk, is that at the same time that you have this fierce competition for just getting the number of bodies in the door, then you get to the question of you want the right people who have the right disposition, the right mindset, the right capacity to learn and improve. And some of that is, I'll give you a couple of examples, that the LAPD is one of the departments still that does not allow officers to have a full sleeve tattoo and visible tattoos, things of that nature. You contrast that with the sheriff's department or other agencies, that's fine, come on in. Some agencies allow officers to have full beards and things of that nature. So I'm not advocating that the LAPD take that step, but it's clear that there are factors that have to be looked at in this kind of fierce competition. Is, do you turn otherwise qualified people away because they have attributes or other features that historically have not been within the image of the department? And there's gender issues where you need to make sure that you've got opportunities for women who can come into the profession. And so vast reservoir of issues that I think need to be addressed and can be, but a lot of it is connected to this broader conversation of making policing an exciting place to be.
What positive things are you aware of that should be shared in the general public so that people's feelings about the future of the LAPD and the future of what will become the commission soon, people can feel, okay, I can hold on to that?
Well, one thing I would say is that it's unfortunate that so few people have the opportunity that I've had to just get to know police officers and to be in and around police officers in a number of different contexts. Because one of the things you learn is, sure, at some level it's cut from a different cloth, people who are mission-driven and things of that nature. And yes, there are people who are cynical about certain things, but what you really come away with, or what I've come away with, is a sense of the decency of the workforce and the people who have really spent many, many years dedicating their lives to the profession. And that's what gives me pause not to be so quick as to paint with too broad a brush everyone that makes up that profession.
Well, thank you so much. This is utterly fascinating, and obviously I would like to stay with you all afternoon, but I think that I've run out of time. But thank you so much, Jill, for being with us. It's been great. Thanks.
Thank you very much for having me.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.